So you'll find most experienced crappie fishermen adopt a fairly delicate hook set, more of a light hook set. Everybody's a little bit different, but I thought I'd kind of go over my hook set for a crappie, since it is way different than what I would do for a white bass or a largemouth bass. So after fishing for white bass, for a while, not having any luck with the crappie, it's not the time of year to fish for crappie or whatever, so I'm dedicated to fishing for the white bass. You sort of get an instinctive hook set, as soon as one hits, you rear back on it pretty hard. I mean, for the white bass, I'll really rear back on it hard. Set it in there. Skipjack as well. Skipjack have a really bony mouth. The white bass are pretty bony, and so a good hard hook set is okay with that. That seems to be the par for the course. So after getting used to doing that, you go over to crappie and you rear back like that real hard and real fast. You'll see that you may lose some fish. So I have to remind myself, okay, that's right, I'm fishing for crappie now. I need to be a little bit more careful with that hook set. Generally, what I do with this particular technique of jig and bobber style fishing from the bank, generally wading in the water, out there just a little bit. The water's down this time of year, so the banks are pretty well exposed. There's no vegetation behind me, so it's open bank right there. So what I'll do is just kind of stand there with a rod in more of a horizontal position than a vertical position. As I remember, sometimes maybe even a really almost a solid horizontal position off to the side, in a position ready for me to do my hook sets. You got to be in a comfortable position to stand there and hold the rod all day and just sit there and reel it back over and over again. So I kind of have adopted that position where it's sort of not maybe horizontal, but just up a few degrees from that. And so when I get a bite, the line goes tight. Instead of just jerking, like trying to pull it up over my head from that position, which I think would be counterintuitive, I just basically, with a flick of the wrist, start to move the rod back to immediately take up the slack. So in other words, as soon as I feel the bite, I want to get that rod moving back as quickly as I can without jerking. So it's a little bit slower going back. If you got a fairly soft tip, that helps as well on your rod. So basically, I'll even just step backwards sometimes. I'll get one on and the line will go tight. First thing I'll do is try to determine, do I have a crappie or am I hung up? Occasionally you will get hung up in these areas that I fish, not too often, but occasionally I do. So I'll kind of step back, try to get the rod moving back and feel if I got a fish. And if you got a crappie, he'll do a quick couple of little tugs, really kind of moderate little tug type thing, and you'll know you got a crappie. Then you can maybe step back a little bit more or move the rod tip back even further. When I'm using a 9-foot rod, without, getting into the geometry of the whole thing, I guess, but I think the longer the rod you've got, the less movement you have to make from your wrist point. When you pivot from that point and go back, then it creates more movement at the rod tip. At least it seems like that with a longer rod. So, but the main thing is to get the rod moving back, feel for the crappie, and if you're not hung up, you go ahead and give it a little bit more pressure, and the main thing is don't let any slack in it. Once you got him and you got the pressure on him, you don't want to let any slack into it. So you got to really focus on keeping that rod tip back, and I think that's one of the things I've noticed with an inexperienced fisherman, particularly a brand new fisherman, is that rod tip will be flying all over the place. They may set the hook, start reeling, and then immediately let the rod tip fall forward as they're reeling, which is not what you want to do with a crappie. If you don't want to let that slack in there. You want to keep that tension on at all costs. So it's important to focus on that with a crappie. It will increase the number of crappie you can get into the boat.